Have you ever been haunted by a single word? A little over a week ago, I spent some days in Southern California, and it was there that I came upon a word that has stayed with me ever since. That word is disruption. I encountered it as I was walking to a favorite coffee shop in my hometown of Pasadena. And on the way, I passed through the campus of the Theological Seminary, where my eye caught a newsstand filled with a stack of glossy publications with that one word in bold capital letters filling the entire cover, disruption. I picked up a copy of the magazine, discovered that after 70 years in Pasadena, Fuller Theological Seminary, a major local institution, was moving to the city of Pomona. The relocation was driven by what they said was declining enrollment, the rising cost of living for students, financial challenges the institution was facing in an increasingly gentrified city of Pasadena. In a publication laced with lament and a few plans for the future, the seminary framed their narrative with a brutal honesty around the impact of this uprooting. But what stayed with me was that one cover word, disruption. During my days in the Southland, there were horrific reports of other, far more deadly forms of disruption. The fires blazing not far from the home that my grandparents lived in. Deadly acts of violence in Thousand Oaks. Entire communities were seeing their seemingly safe and secure worlds ripped apart. Now, disruption comes in many forms and operates on a variety of levels and scales. I suspect all of us, in some very personal way, have experienced a form of disruption, such as what occurs when an illness strikes us, or strikes someone that we love, or when a job is lost, or when a relationship comes to an end. Disruption. Even the shuttering of a restaurant that we once used to go to mark those special occasions of life can cause a disruption. My very presence with you this morning is the result of a disruption that occurred in the life of our beloved mother, Luann, and in turn in the life of this community of St. Gabriel's. And while a disruption can be the result of many causes and can take many forms, the underlying dynamic is always the same. We might call this dynamic the arc of disruption. It begins with a breaking open of the world we've known. In some significant way, that world comes apart. Often it's shattered. Then there's a period of search and struggle that may take months or even years, until finally, hopefully, we're able to recompose our world. Although the world we recompose will often be quite different, a different world from the one we knew before the disruption occurred. Now, disruption is one of the constant themes of the Scriptures. The story of the Exodus from Egypt, the exile into Babylon. Central themes in the Hebrew Scriptures are Old Testament. The New Testament itself is framed by a massive disruption with the occupation of the Romans and their rule and control, supported with the complicity of the religious authorities of the day. This very season that we're in now, we call Extended Advent. This could well be called the season of disruption. And if you want to get the picture, just read the Gospels we are facing through this 7-week season. And it all comes to an end, does it not, with that disruptive, angelic news that came to a young girl in the little town of Nazareth. Mark's Gospel lesson for today, part of what is sometimes called a little apocalypse or prophetic revelation. We find Jesus, who's been in Jerusalem, leaving the temple when one of his disciples exclaimed, you can just picture this kind of person. Look, what large stones, what a beautiful place, what massive buildings. This is probably disguise. To which Jesus responds, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon another. They'll all be thrown down." Whoops. This is astonishing. For the temple complex was magnificent. It was the largest sacred structure in the entire Roman world, covering some 35 acres. And so, wrestling with Jesus' words, a short while later, across the valley from Jerusalem on the Mount of Olives, the inner circle of disciples corner Jesus and raise a question. Tell us, when will this be? When will this disruption take place? And what will be the sign? Well, here, Jesus. And how often this is true with Jesus, he doesn't exactly answer the question as it's posed. He doesn't give them a date that they can enter into their iPad and make sure it comes up with the proper notifications. Rather, he does something far more significant. Jesus gives some clues about how to navigate disruptive times. I believe that we too, as Latter-day followers of Jesus, can gain some insight from this exchange as how we might navigate the disruptions that we face in our lives. First, Jesus encourages his disciples to be discerning. He said there are voices you're going to hear all around in disruptive times that can lead you astray. There always are strident voices that can make cheap promises or to take us away from the work that God has given us to do. And then Jesus goes on to give a hint, a promise for the future. It's captured in those final words in our gospel that may have slid by you. That these disruptive times can become the beginning of the birth pangs of something new. The beginning of new possibilities that God can bring forth out of the upheavals of life. As Mark Lowell Branson reminds us, God is always initiating. That's the kind of God we have, the God who initiates. This is not a simplistic belief that God causes everything. The disruptions of life will occur. Why they occur in many cases, we'll never know. But we're simply to be alert to the signs of new life, what God may be doing in the face of the disruption. And to do the work, this work of discernment, not succumbing to strident voices, not listening to false prophets, being alert to these birth pangs of new life, we're being called to live counter-cultural lives, to live against the stream of where the culture would take us, to follow the pathway of Jesus. And isn't that what we have claimed in those baptismal promises we recite from time to time? We're asked, will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? And what do you say? I will, with God's help. Or will you work for justice and for peace, respecting the dignity of every human being? And I'd add, no exceptions. And we respond, I will, with God's help. So individually and together, all of us as a community of faith, we're called in the most disruptive times to continue to be living parables of God's compassion and God's grace, even in the midst of these events.